It's good coffee. Thanks for joining me. Good to see you. I'm Jerrell. Today I want to discuss Pokémon Scarlet and Violet Switch 2 versions. We will see these games enhanced and improved in some ways for the upcoming Switch 2, but I want to discuss what we can realistically expect to see in terms of improvements and what we are unlikely to see, what Game Freak most likely won't change or improve about these games. So I just want to share with you briefly my personal journey. I'm very excited. I just got my 5th gym badge. I was fighting this guy that was dressed all in purple. The gym was purple. All his Pokemon were purple and very tanky. But I was able to deal with them, and I thought, cool, I'll get a purple badge, poison type. I think I get the theming. It all made sense to me by the end of the gym battle. And then I got a pink gym badge. So you never can tell with people, can you? Anyway, I've discussed the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games a few times in previous videos, and I don't want to repeat any information. I think that's pretty boring for people. So I do want to keep this intro and this video fast. I'm very busy with my own game development work. I have a number of titles that I'll be finishing up and shipping later this year, and I don't really have the luxury of time to spend all day talking about these kinds of topics and making videos. So I'll do my best and share any information and my thoughts on the topic. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at what we can expect from the Switch 2 versions of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So I don't actually remember where I am in this save file, so we're going to run around and see what we have going on here. Now, we are just waiting for this loading screen here, and that brings me to my first point. Is the first thing we can expect from the Switch 2 version of this game is faster loading times. You can see we are sitting here, the loading symbol is there, I'm in front of it, but we can absolutely expect to see faster loading times. It felt like, from a modern gaming standpoint, that felt like it was a little bit too long here. So on the Switch 2 versions, absolutely. We can even see this, say for example, in the examples Nintendo has shown from the Legend of Zelda games, that there are significantly faster loading times. As we can see here, the characters' graphics that are popping in and out from a distance. The reason why we do this in game development is that there is a performance cost. Games have a rendering budget. They can only render so many things on screen. Look at our hand, just sort of we can only render so many things on screen before we reach our rendering budget, and everything has a cost. The character, the trees, the graphics, any visual effects. If we use too much of our rendering budget, the game slows down, and that's when you have the drop in frame rate. So what we can expect to see is farther drawing distances, which means the characters won't pop in and out. We would have to get much farther and farther away before the characters pop in and out. That is something we can expect to see. And also what we have here an example of is, you see that Pokemon over there with its very jittery animation. That is a Rotom. Let's get closer and see what happens. Oh no, I think Rotom is actually Rotom is kind of like that. He's just kind of jittery. But you see here is, and this was very evident in early versions, especially the launch day version of Scarlet and Violet, is that as characters got farther from the camera, their animations, the way that their bodies move, they got significantly worse. They were very choppy. And that was done to alleviate some of the pressure on the rendering budget and the processing budget, is that if there are less frames of animation for the characters to process, then it would help improve the frame rate, because the game is already struggling. But in the grand scheme of things, lowering the frame rate of character animations does not actually give that much of a benefit. And so it's a situation where they were making the game worse, and it wasn't actually helping that much anyway. You can see they've improved it with updates and patches. It's significantly better than it was earlier in the product lifespan, but you can tell the character in the back there that's walking just now, Her frame rate is a bit lower than this character here, but it's not as bad as it used to be. It used to be way worse than that. As she's getting farther away, you can see it's getting even lower frame rate on her animation, and then she disappeared into the void. So we can expect to see that not be an issue. We can expect to see smoother animations for the characters as they're moving, and that applies to things like windmills and flags. We've seen points in the game where windmills are turning in a very stuttered way, and I also want to point something out here which I think is a little funny, is the quality of animation. So say, for example, as we get farther from this man, and as we saw with the woman as well, their hands actually are not being animated. Their hands are just like this, the default pose. You'll see as we approach this man and get closer to him, his hands will animate suddenly. They will have keyframe animation. You can see suddenly they're closed, and it's not because they're meant to do that. It's because that when he's farther from the camera, he's just programmed to not have keyframe animations applied to his hand in an attempt to improve the performance. But again, it doesn't actually give that much of a benefit. It doesn't actually help that much. Something that we will see, this is definitely a given, is smoother navigation through menus and boxes. So as we go through my boxes here, and this is hugely improved. In early versions of this game, it was way worse than this, but it took a while for the Pokemon's graphics to load in. In previous versions, you could be waiting, 10 seconds or so or thereabouts before all the icons loaded in. So it shows that Game Freak is listening. Game Freak is improving their product. They do want to make the game better for people. There is a minor delay, but in my opinion, it isn't really a big deal. I think that's fine, but it will be even better. It will be even smoother. Let's go ahead, and if we can take a look at our Pokédex here. Now, I've seen people that were... and this was from about a year ago. They were explaining how it takes a while for all of these images to load in. And this is something that Game Freak, again, has improved, because you can see that all of these assets just are smooth now. It's not taking a while for them to load in. We'll just boot one up. You can see that that goes through pretty smoothly. There's no lagging or waiting there. But there are some hiccups. There's some frame hiccups. As we transition and open menus, there is a little bit of minor hiccuping in battle, but this is something that Game Freak has already improved, and it's something that inherently will be even better because the Switch 2 just has brute force. It has power. So, something that we'll see as well is we won't see the stuttering as we go from area to area. As we go to certain locations and environments, we see frame rate drops, and this is something that we will see improved on the Switch 2. We're just going to have smoother frame rates, and that's because the Switch 2 has brute force. It has raw power that the Switch does not have. So I'm going to leave this area, and we'll now traverse to this outdoor area. And it is a little stuttery, but this is hugely improved over what we saw previously. I've bumped into a Pokemon, and now I must engage in mortal combat. None of these moves are very effective, but the enemy is at a significantly lower level than me. One of the things that Game Freak fixed in the past was an issue the camera had. When the camera would get close to the ground, sometimes the camera could actually clip underneath the terrain, and you can see under the map it broke immersion, but that's something Game Freak fixed as well. And that is basically all we can reasonably expect. Faster asset loading, smoother performance overall. It'll have a smoother frame rate. There won't be stuttering when you're going from one area to another. Area 0 is particularly difficult for the game to render, so the performance drops significantly. As Pokemon get farther from the camera, if you have a look at the wheel on my ride Pokemon here, you can see that the wheel is actually quite angular. So the Pokemon is now a certain distance away from the viewing camera, and now it is using a lower poly count version. All of these game graphics are made out of polygons. They're formed by things called vertices. A vertex is like a dot. It's connect the dots in real space, but the more vertices you have, the more polygons you have, the more expensive it is for the game to render, so it negatively, in fact, impacts performance. You can see the wheel is still very angular. When the camera gets closer to the character here, you'll see that the wheel is suddenly round and smooth. So it's a higher quality visual asset, but it costs more to render. If we have a bunch of Pokemon that use their high quality models here, that causes performance drops. But because the Switch 2 is significantly stronger, most likely we won't see this. Most likely we won't see the lower quality versions of the models until very far away. It would be ideal if they didn't switch to the lower level of detail until the Pokemon was so far away that we would not be able to discern the difference. So those are the things we can reasonably expect to see improved and changed. Now I'll explain what is possible, but we might not see. There's a good chance that they might not include these improvements, and that would be higher quality visuals. So say for example the terrain here, it's very plain looking. The development team could have used more advanced 3D modeling and 3D texturing techniques. They could have used more modern techniques to hide that so that we don't see the tiling. Textures have to repeat. We have a finite amount of memory available on the system in which to load in our graphics. So we can't just have infinitely unique visual graphics, so we repeat the textures by tiling them, but it is unfortunately quite unpleasant to look at when you can see that it is obviously tiled. Games like Xenoblade Chronicles X look fantastic, and they're able to hide the tiling using modern texturing techniques. That's something that we don't see here, and it's unlikely that we will see that improvement in the Switch 2 version. It just requires some specialized 3D modelers and texturing work, and that is not something we've seen from Game Freak before. So we are very unlikely to see an improvement in visuals in terms of the environments like that. It's possible, but not likely. It's possible that we will see higher quality visual effects in terms of bloom and reflections in the water. If you have a look at my reflection, you can see that it's actually like a lower quality image in the water. You can see that it's actually quite pixelated. My character's reflection is in the water. It's very likely that we will see an improvement where that will look better. Anything under the water will look better. You can see that's actually looking a bit pixelated. The Pokemon there under the water, the Peekaboo, as it were. We'll have a look at the Psyduck here. And you can see that it is the reflection. It's more visible on the bigger Pokemon. And this is actually something I'm noticing. They've actually improved this. This is something that was more egregious in terms of its visual downgrade in previous versions. So I'm seeing that in recent versions they actually have improved this, and they actually have made that better. So I'm actually quite impressed. I'm surprised and impressed. And that's it. I will discuss the things that it's basically very unlikely. It's probably a given that these things will not be improved. So the next things I'll be discussing will be things that the team, it's very unlikely that they will improve. So the first thing will be improved lighting and shadows. It's very unlikely that we will see improved lighting and shadows. I'll go ahead and just warp to another area so we can have a look at some other visuals. Let's go ahead and warp on over here. So we have a very basic lighting and shadow system. There is some use of physically based rendering, which is a modern form of calculating lighting and shadows to make visuals pop, to make them look nice. It makes things just look more visually complex and interesting to look at, but it's quite expensive to render. But the environments themselves, the core assets are quite plain, and the lighting system is actually quite basic. Something that we don't see is a sense of volumetric lighting or atmospheric fog. Ideally, things in the distance should be fading away to match the color of the sky. You can see that it absolutely is not happening here. So it looks like a very... It's difficult to make a comparison, because even PlayStation 1 and N64 games used a very simple form of fog, of distance fog. It's very basic technology that we've had for decades. It's something that we use to create a sense of density in the atmosphere. It's unlikely that they're going to improve that. If you look at a game like Breath of the Wild, they use true volumetric fog to make the distance blend into the sky, and it makes the atmosphere look organic and natural. It's not something that we are likely to see improve in this case. You see there's a hard line in the horizon there that doesn't exactly blend that well. Something that we won't see is upscaled textures. These textures are not really that bad, but you can tell that the grass itself is kind of low resolution. The rocks are low resolution. We are very unlikely to see them improve that, because we've seen in the trailers for Legends, not Legends Arceus, Legends ZA, that there doesn't seem to be a difference in the, well, that much of a noticeable difference between the texture quality. There probably is some, but we haven't really seen that. So it's unlikely they'll go through the effort and time, because the development team has so many other things to focus on. We won't see upscale textures, and we most likely won't see a removal of any inherent glitches. Now, early on in this game's lifespan, especially after launch, many people were roasting this game and making fun of glitches, but I could tell, because I'm a developer and I work basically every day on the Switch, people were actually running this game on emulators. It was very obvious for me to tell. General everyday gamers probably wouldn't be able to tell, but I could tell people were running this game on emulators, resulting in weird glitches that don't happen on the Switch version. But unfortunately, people just sort of ran with it because they love roasting things, and they said, yeah, this game is full of glitches. A lot of the glitches we saw online were just exclusive to emulators. And it's tough. It makes it very tough for the development team to pinpoint and figure out what they should be working on. You'll see things like the environment will clip in and out. If the camera turns in a certain way, you'll see shadows from terrain flickering in and out. They're using internal logic to try to cull out the graphics to make it easier, but it's a whole... The development team has wasted their time doing that, because modern rendering engines have something called frustum culling. If something is not on screen, it shouldn't be rendered anyway unless they use something called static batching, which basically groups everything together. So say, for example, if you static batch every tree, let's call it a pine tree. If one pine tree is on screen, then every single pine tree in the game has to be rendered. Let me just talk to this little fella. And that's why static batching isn't necessarily the best thing in the world. But otherwise, anything that's not on screen shouldn't be processed, so there shouldn't be a performance cost. So the development team has wasted their time trying to cull out the terrain, buildings and whatnot, and we see them flickering it. If you move the camera fast enough, you see shadows flickering in and out during combat. It's not great. Unfortunately, they would have to manually remove the logic for that from a programming standpoint, and I don't believe that they would spend the time and resources doing that. So unfortunately, I think those glitches will remain. So, and of course the resolution, I mean, that goes without saying, is that the game will run at full resolution. We see many points where the resolution here, internal rendering resolution, drops, and that's to try to keep performance higher. And they actually, Game Freak has improved that repeatedly through patches, but it's still not great. They have improved it, but it's still not great. Oh, 13 there. Neat. Very cool. So I want to share my personal recommendations and thoughts, what I want to see improved. Basically, my wish list. I really like these games. Someone once commented and said that they were getting kind of irritated with me constantly talking about this game. and just pointing out things that weren't great. And I only do that to be constructive. I really like this game. This is among my favorites in the series because of the gameplay. I really enjoy the gameplay. The story is, I wouldn't say the story, but the plot. The overall plot is significantly better than what we get in games like Sword and Shield. I had a lot of fun with this game. I really enjoyed it. So me saying any kind of critique towards it is purely constructive and to be helpful. I really, really like these games. It's among my favorite in the series. So my personal recommendations and thoughts, I would remove the dynamic asset loading from the game. This game has to dynamically load assets in and out as you reach certain areas, or you, you know, have to keep the system from having too many assets in memory, otherwise the game would crash. But because the Switch 2 has so much more memory, 3 times the memory of the original Switch, there isn't a need to dynamically load assets in and out. Things like, you know, opening the Pokemon box and trying to load in the icons there, you don't have to do that anymore. So I would personally recommend removing any kind of dynamic asset loading because that results in stuttering. There is no reason to have that, and the Switch 2 can handle anything that's in this game. All the assets just loaded in. The Switch 2 can handle it. The implementation of volumetric lighting and some depth of field would make this game look significantly better. I look into the distance, there's no depth of field, there's no volumetric fog. This is very plain looking. This isn't that pleasant to look at, especially when you look at a game like Xenoblade Chronicles X or Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. They use volumetric fog. In some cases, they use depth of field. On the Switch, depth of field was very expensive to render. It caused performance implications, so it's not great to have it here. But on the Switch 2, we've seen games with Switch 2, like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Cyberpunk 2077, they have depth of field and volumetric fog. I would strongly recommend implementing some of that, because it would make the game just look and feel significantly better than what we see now. And whatever weird implementation of shadow casting that we see here, see how very stuttery it is as the sunlight moves, or the primary source of light in the sky moves. The shadows are extremely stuttery. This is quite jarring to me. It's one of the things that I have to actively ignore when I'm playing the game. I've never seen a game do this. Obviously, the developers have implemented this for performance implications to try to improve performance here. Take that out. Whatever is happening there, and just use full real-time lighting, use a different lighting system. It would make the game just be so much better, just an overall significantly better experience. So that is what I would personally want from this. That's all I want. And it's not really that much to ask for. Even if you don't improve the textures of the terrain, who cares? Who cares? You know, the people that complained about it have already spoken their piece. But what this game really needs is just better overall presentation in terms of the visuals. And it would be very simple to implement volumetric lighting and to change whatever weirdness is going on with the shadows. I would really like to see the geometry stop popping in and out. But who knows? Who knows what the developers will actually implement. So those are my points that I would love to see those improved. I would love to see those implemented. But maybe they won't. Maybe they won't. So, right. That is the list of things what we can expect, what's possible, but maybe we won't see it, and what is very unlikely, and also the things that I would like to see. Thanks very much for spending some time with me, for enjoying these games. Again, I'm not attacking or criticizing this game. I'm offering critique from a helpful position as a fellow game developer. I massively enjoy these games. I really like Scarlet and Violet. I prefer X and Y. Something about X and Y. The region had so much life and character. The new Pokemon that they introduced, there weren't that many new ones actually. X and Y introduced not that many, but I really enjoyed them. And of course I'm all about Fire Red and Leaf Green. I could go back and play Fire Red and Leaf Green any day, really. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for spending a bit of time with me. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll put some links on the screen if you would like to see my other videos discussing Pokemon. Okay, be well. Don't forget to save your game manually. Good luck shiny hunting. Grind out those levels. I'll see you around.